A new update has emerged in Minnesota's growing fraud crisis as the Trump administration moves to take action against thousands of Minnesota borrowers suspected of taking out fraudulent loans during the COVID-19 pandemic, signaling that what many once dismissed as isolated abuse is now being treated as a systemic failure demanding federal intervention. The fraud situation in Minnesota continues to expand day by day, and while more than 7,000 individuals have already been caught stealing money through 2020-era loans, new revelations point to a shadowy network of home care facilities that may have been deliberately created to give fraudsters even greater access to taxpayer funds, with operations stretching far beyond state borders. Here in Minnesota, blatant fraud appears to be hiding in plain sight, starting with a daycare center once known as Creative Minds Daycare, which was shut down only to reopen the very next day under the name Super Kids, a move that somehow did not prevent it from receiving a staggering $2.45 million in government money. What looks like an ordinary single-family home is being marketed as an assisted living facility owned by a man indicted for laundering over $1 million, while his wife operates the facilities and the state continues to issue payments as he awaits trial, highlighting a system that seems unable or unwilling to hit pause even amid criminal charges. Altogether, these borrowers were approved for roughly 7,900 PPP and EIDL loans totaling around $400 million, even as state officials insist they are taking fraud seriously and improving oversight, while simultaneously accusing political opponents of exploiting the issue to justify cutting off funding. These assisted living facilities alone received more than $2.3 million in state money in just the past year, and according to a Minnesota Reformer article, one individual connected to the network has been paid an astonishing $49 million since 2016, raising serious questions about oversight and accountability. When Americans were struggling to survive in 2020, fraudsters in Minnesota walked away with roughly $400 million, and what the president now estimates to be an $18 billion scam has ballooned thanks to programs seemingly designed to be exploited by businesses with official-sounding names. The Feeding Our Future scandal, which was meant to ensure children never went hungry, was looted, followed by an explosion of fake daycare centers with no children inside, and now single-family homes registered as assisted living facilities all tapping into government money under the guise of public service. This is not just a Minnesota problem, as similar home care scams are spreading across the country, with alleged fraudsters registering private residences as care sites to collect federal benefits that often end up flowing back into political campaigns that advocate for the very programs being exploited. Officials openly promote expanding universal pre-K and home-based childcare, promising partnerships with providers, but critics ask what could possibly go wrong when such programs lack enforceable safeguards and meaningful audits. The anger many Americans feel stems from the belief that this fraud is effectively state-sponsored, enabled by governments acting in the name of goodwill while presiding over what critics describe as a massive theft operation worsened by weak borders and bloated safety nets with no guardrails. As investigations close in, some Minnesota daycare centers under scrutiny have reported suspicious break-ins where thieves allegedly bypassed nearby stores filled with cash and goods to steal only sensitive paperwork, including enrollment and employee records, conveniently removing evidence of fraud. The explanation strains credibility, with observers pointing out that the damage appears inconsistent with an external break-in and suggesting the incident may have been staged, especially since the records disappeared just one day after federal officials requested them. Another glaring mystery remains the absence of parents, as no crowds have appeared to defend these daycare centers or protest their closures, despite claims that tens of thousands of children would supposedly lose access to care and devastate the state's economy. The silence is telling, as there are no parents on the news, no viral outrage on social media, and no evidence of families scrambling for alternatives, reinforcing the suspicion that these centers never served real communities to begin with. The same Creative Minds Daycare, still bearing its old sign despite being officially shut down, continues to receive $2.45 million with luxury vehicles parked outside and no children in sight, making the operation look less like childcare and more like a cash pipeline. Investigations outside Minnesota reveal similar patterns, such as Aisha Home Childcare in Kent, Washington, which reportedly received over $753,000 since 2022 while serving just 2 children, despite being licensed for 12. Inside the home, inspectors found a staged daycare room with untouched toys and children allegedly placed there moments before a visit, further fueling claims that private residences are being repackaged as businesses to collect subsidies. Financial records showed the owner received hundreds of thousands in childcare funding alongside welfare, health benefits, and assistance over multiple years, prompting critics to question how one individual can legally receive so many streams of public money at once. Across the country, assisted living facilities are proliferating at rates far exceeding population growth, with small cities boasting more facilities than major metropolitan areas, a statistical red flag that suggests widespread fraud rather than sudden public health crises. Auditing these operations is notoriously difficult, as investigators must enter private homes where personal living spaces overlap with supposed care sites, making it nearly impossible to distinguish legitimate services from outright scams. One Minnesota assisted living operation is linked to an individual indicted in the Feeding Our Future scandal, yet payments continue to flow, reinforcing the perception that being charged with fraud does not disqualify someone from receiving state funds. Officials deny state-enabled fraud, even as records show millions still being paid out, and federal authorities, not the state, leading prosecutions, with Minnesota itself reportedly putting no one in jail over these schemes. As Democrats accuse President Trump and Republicans of politicizing the scandal, critics argue the real issue is a lack of enforcement, with fraudulent businesses reopening under new names and continuing to collect money. Observers warn that these fraud networks form a political machine, benefiting one side of the aisle while draining resources meant for struggling Americans, all while being dismissed as partisan attacks. With estimates placing Minnesota's total fraud losses in the billions and evidence mounting across all 50 states, critics argue the only explanation for inaction is that too many powerful interests benefit from the status quo, leaving taxpayers to foot the bill while the system continues unchecked.